Canadian Tears. 2 words. Spoken by a 4-time NHL All-Star Jack Eichel into an NBC camera. Asked what the biggest prize in the 2026 Milan Winter Olympics is, he didn't say gold. He didn't say glory. He didn't say standing on top of the podium while his nation's anthem played. He said Canadian Tears. The room cheered. NBC turned it into a commercial. Aired it during Sunday Night Football. Tens of millions of Americans watched their Olympic hockey team celebrate the idea of making their northern neighbor cry. Then NBC did something else. They geo-locked the ad, blocked it in Canada. Think about that for a moment. They wanted to broadcast the pursuit of Canadian suffering as a trophy. But they didn't want Canadians to actually see it. They wanted to pass the tears around like a ceremonial cup. In a room with the door closed while the country crying was left standing outside. But Canada found out. The world found out. And what happened next wasn't just about hockey. It wasn't just about the Olympics. It was the moment the last wall between sports and geopolitics collapsed entirely. And today, we're not talking about tariffs or pipelines or fighter jets. We're talking about something far more intimate, far more human, and in some ways, far more damning. We're talking about how America's longest, closest, most blood-soaked alliance became a punchline. How a country that opened its airports and its homes to stranded Americans on 9/11 became the antagonist the world boos on live television. And how 2 words, Canadian Tears, may end up costing the United States something no trade deal or diplomatic reset can ever recover: its moral standing. Before we get to the booing, before the brawls and the boycotts, we need to understand what's actually being lost here. Not in abstract geopolitical terms, but in human ones. September 11th, 2001. American airspace shut down. 38 commercial flights, 6,800 passengers, 238 planes, all diverted, all stranded, with nowhere to go. The town of Gander, Newfoundland. Population 10,000. In the hours after the attacks, Gander took in 6,800 strangers, processed them, not housed them in temporary shelters. Took them in. Opened schools, churches, community centers. Opened homes. Brought them meals, blankets, phone lines to call frantic families. Held people who didn't know if their spouses, their children, their parents were still alive. This wasn't government policy. This was individual Canadians in a small town on the edge of the Atlantic, looking at terrified Americans and saying, "You're not alone." That story became Come From Away, one of the most beloved musicals in Broadway history. Americans wept in theaters watching Canadians be kind to them. 25 years later, an American Olympic broadcaster puts out a commercial celebrating the desire to make those same Canadians cry. This is not a trade dispute. This is not a political disagreement. This is a cultural and moral rupture, so complete that it's almost impossible to process. And here's the part that should terrify Washington. They don't even seem to realize it happened. Let's go back to where this really detonated. Not Milan, not the NBC boardroom. Montreal, February 2025, the four nations face-off. United States versus Canada at the Bell Center. The context is essential here. Donald Trump had spent the preceding weeks openly, repeatedly, casually referring to Canada as the 51st state. Not as a joke, as a stated policy aspiration. He was threatening 25% tariffs on everything Canada sells. The relationship was already in freefall. 21,105 people in that arena. The announcer asks, in both French and English, for respect during both anthems. Then the Star-Spangled Banner begins, and 21,000 people booed. Not scattered, not subdued. The entire arena for the entire anthem. a sound like nothing heard in international hockey in decades. Then the puck dropped. 2 seconds. Matthew Tkachuk and Brandon Hagel, gloves off. Brady Tkachuk and Sam Bennett fighting. JT Miller and Colton Parayko dropped. 3 fights. 9 seconds. CBS News called it the fastest brawl in international hockey history. Matthew Tkachuk after the game. The message we wanted to send is it's our time. But here's the moment most people missed. The moment that should have told America everything about what was coming. During O Canada, the anthem singer Chantal Kreviazuk changed the lyrics on live television. The official line, "In all of us command," she sang, "that only us command." An anthem singer, a Canadian cultural figure on the world stage in front of 21,000 people and a national television audience, rewrote her own national anthem in real time to send a direct message to the President of the United States. That is not sports. That is not politics. That is a country telling another country, you have pushed us too far. 11 months later. Milan, Italy. Olympic opening ceremony. Team USA walks in, the athletes themselves, real people who have trained for years, who have nothing to do with trade policy or diplomatic spats, receive genuine applause. The crowd respects their effort, their sacrifice. Then the camera pans to the VIP section. Vice President J.D. Vance waving a tiny American flag. 65,000 people, Italians, Europeans, fans from around the world, began to boo. Not politely, not briefly. Sustained, audible, unmistakable jeering. CBC broadcaster Adrian Arsenault, live on air. Oop, those are a lot of boos for him. Trump from Air Force One. That's surprising. People like him, he doesn't get booed in this country. In this country. That's the sentence, that's the tell. He genuinely does not understand that there is a world outside his country, and that world has been watching, forming opinions, drawing conclusions. America wanted Canadian tears. Instead, its vice president became the most booed man at an Olympic ceremony in modern memory. And the worst part? The American athletes, the actual competitors, the ones wearing the flag, are the ones who have to absorb the whiplash. Ben Ogden, U.S. cross-country skier, the day before the opening ceremony. It's a confusing time to be wearing the stars and stripes. There are aspects of being American I'm not proud of. An American Olympian, in uniform, on the record, telling the world he's not proud of his country. Zach Kett, another American skier from Minneapolis, a city where federal agents had recently killed 2 civilians during an enforcement operation, tried to distance himself. I'm not representing all those bad people, I'm representing all the good people. Imagine being an athlete at the peak of your career and having to publicly disavow your own government just to feel clean competing. That's not patriotism. That's damage control. And now, the summer, the 2026 FIFA World Cup. 48 nations, hosted primarily by the United States. The largest sporting event on the planet. It is in serious structural trouble. Oka Götelük, vice president of Germany's Football Federation, publicly compared hosting the World Cup in America to hosting the Olympics in the Soviet Union. By my reckoning, the potential threat is greater now than it was then. Bild, Germany's largest newspaper. 47% of Germans support a boycott. The Netherlands, 150,000 signatures on a petition demanding the national team withdraw. France debated pulling out. Denmark is monitoring. South African politicians called for withdrawal. And Sepp Blatter, the man who ran FIFA for 17 years, stay away from the USA. This is not a fringe movement. This is the mainstream political conversation in key American allied nations. The 1980 Olympic boycott was state-directed, Cold War-driven, overtly geopolitical. This boycott, if it happens, will be organic. It will come from fans, from federations, from players who look at the United States in 2026 and see not a welcoming host, but a nation where visa approval is uncertain, where border enforcement is aggressive, where their own supporters might be turned away at entry. The document mentions Casey Wasserman, head of the Los Angeles 2028 Summer Olympics, standing before the International Olympic Committee and promising that America will be a safe and secure environment. No host country in history has ever had to make that promise. No host country has ever needed to. And now, February 11th, 2026. Men's hockey. Canada versus the United States. Olympic ice, Milan. NHL players back at the Olympics for the first time since 2014. Sidney Crosby, the man who scored the overtime goal that beat America in Vancouver in 2010, watched by 26 million Canadians, on the bench. Connor McDavid, widely considered the best player alive, wearing the maple leaf. The defending Olympic champions against the team whose broadcaster called their tears the prize. David Shoemaker, CEO of the Canadian Olympic Committee, asked about the rivalry. There's a little bit more writing on it. A little bit more writing. That may be the understatement of these entire games. This game will not be just hockey. It will be the physical, emotional, symbolic manifestation of everything that has fractured between these two countries over the past 5 years. The tariffs. The 51st state comments. The ambassador who said, "We don't need you." The commercial celebrating Canadian suffering. The anthem booing. The 9-second brawl. The overtime win on American ice. The vice president booed by 65,000 people. The athletes ashamed of their own flag. All of it converges on a single sheet of ice in Milan. And here's the part that should keep strategists awake at night. In 1980, the miracle on ice was America as the underdog, the scrappy team of college kids beating the Soviet machine. The world cheered for the United States. America was the symbol of hope, of defiance, of something pure. In 2026, if there is a miracle, if there is a moment, the world will not be cheering for the stars and stripes. They will be watching, waiting, and, if the opening ceremony is any indication, hoping for a different outcome entirely. So let's return to those two words. Canadian tears. America wanted them. NBC celebrated them. A 4-time NHL All-Star offered them up as the ultimate prize. But here's what America actually got. A vice president booed off the world stage. Olympians apologizing for their own flag. Allies comparing a U.S.-hosted World Cup to the Soviet bloc. A town in Newfoundland that once took in 6,800 strangers, now watching a commercial that frames their grief as a trophy. And a hockey game, just a game really, that has somehow become the most politically charged athletic contest since the Cold War. Canada didn't want this. Canadians didn't wake up 5 years ago hoping to become America's geopolitical adversary. They wanted what they always wanted: a stable, respectful, mutually beneficial relationship with the neighbor they share a continent with. But you can only tell a country it doesn't matter, doesn't need to be consulted, doesn't have a seat at the table so many times before that country starts building its own table. We've documented this shift in trade, in energy, in defense, in infrastructure. Now we're documenting it in sport, in culture, in the hearts and minds of everyday people who used to see Americans as cousins and now see them as something else. The Olympic medal ceremony will end, the flags will be lowered, the athletes will go home, but the commercial is still out there. The two words are still echoing. The booing is still ringing in the ears of everyone who heard it. And the question no one in Washington seems willing to ask is this: if the world is booing your vice president at the Olympics, and your own athletes are apologizing for your flag, and your closest ally is actively building infrastructure to bypass your economy, at what point does it stop being a public relations problem and start being a strategic reality? America wanted Canadian tears. What it got was a mirror, and it's not sure it likes what it sees. What do you think? Is the Canadian tears moment a symptom of something deeper or just an isolated tone-deaf marketing disaster? Can sports ever truly be separate from politics, or is that idea permanently dead? And what happens when Canada and the United States meet on Olympic ice this month? Let me know in the comments. If you want to understand these cultural and geopolitical shifts before they explode into headlines, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We're watching what everyone else misses.